Calligraphy School in King's College in Cambridge. He collected stone inscriptions widely in the Near East, taught Assyrian and Babylonian archaeology at King's College for a number of years, and published a large number of works on these subjects. He is known for his translations of the ancient works such as the Code of Hammurabi. He became the assistant to the keeper of Egyptian and Assyrian antiquities at the British Museum. Some of his first works: Steps in Assyrian, a book for beginners, a series of historical and mythological, religious, magical, and epistolary and other texts printed in cuneiform characters with interlinear transliteration and translation, and a sketch of Assyrian grammar, sign list, and vocabulary. This guy was an expert, man. An expert. So when these tablets, when we tell you we're reading these tablets, we're reading tablets that were deciphered by people that are well versed in these translations and these multi-languages, these ancient languages, these ancient tongues. Okay, it's real stuff. This is the real information coming from our ancestors. Letters and Inscriptions of Hammurabi, he wrote in 1898. Encyclopedia Biblica, he was a contributor to that in 1903. Egypt and Western Asia in the Light of Recent Discoveries, 1907. Chronicles Concerning Early Babylonian Kings, 1907. Legends of Babylonian and Egyptian in Relation to Hebrew Tradition, 1916. The Seven Tablets of Creation, which is what this I was kind of leading in here. Okay, he deciphered those and wrote about those, the Babylonian and Syrian legends concerning the creation of the world and mankind. The Code of Hammurabi in 1899. We're talking about experts here. Okay, and in the Library of Ashurbanipal, here we see a fragment of the cuneiform. So you say, where are these things located? Can I actually go see them? Yeah, you can go see these tablets, man. They're real. Just go to England, go to the British Museum, and they're right there. You can take a picture with your phone and go back, and you can decipher the cuneiform for yourself if you don't believe what it says. It's all real. Here is the CDLI Cuneiform Digital Library, hosted by UCLA in America. So if you want to know what stone tablets say, you can go to this website, CDLI Cuneiform Digital Library. Google that. Go to this website, and you can grab a virtual stone off the virtual shelf and drop it into a translating device, and it will give you, it will spit out what the words are saying in cuneiform to English or whatever other language you speak. Okay? Again, you don't need to read Zechariah Sitchin's work. You can read this for yourself and come up with your own conclusions. Was Zechariah Sitchin 100% accurate on everything that he came up with in his books? Maybe not. A lot of these are theories. What he did was he left a reference to every single location that he got the text from to come up with his theory for that particular part of the book. He left a doggone breadcrumb trail. If he was off here or off there, it doesn't matter. His things that might have been slightly off were small compared to the general picture. The general picture is, and now hundreds of researchers and archaeologists have come up with the same conclusion, including myself. People from somewhere else came here according to these texts, engaged mankind, and not only taught us things, but also at some point genetically modified us, turning us into worker bees for them and making us believe that they were God, but they weren't. They were just regular old-fashioned people just like me and you. They just had a little bit more knowledge. That's all they had. They put on their pants one leg at a time, just like us. And so this is how cuneiform is made. I wonder if I could play this one. Let me see if I can get this to play for a second here.
Which had been invented in ancient Europe, which is a Semitic tongue related to the modern languages of Hebrew, Arabic, and Aramaic. The writing system which Cyrus's officials used was the traditional cuneiform script, which had been invented in ancient Iraq well before 3000 BC. It is written by pressing a stylus, something a bit like a chopstick, into the surface of the clay, which is nearly dry, and the signs which convey the sound of the language consist of different arrangements of these strokes. They're written one by one, and the reader has to join them up, and the sound emerges from the clay. This is the line that says, I am Kurash, Shah Kishati, king of the world, great king, king of Babylon. So it goes on. So we're going to write Kurash. So the first sign, Ku, has a big vertical, two small horizontals, one bigger horizontal, a little vertical, and another horizontal like a box. This is Ku. Then Ra, we have three strong horizontals to begin, one big one next to it, and then one little vertical wedge, and one bigger vertical wedge. Ku, Ra. Now we do Ash, which is three long horizontals cross up, and then a vertical in the middle. So we can read this, Ku, Ra, Ash, the name of the signs.
Okay. Real simple, guys. Just showing you that there's no mystery behind these tablets. Like, it's been this big thing, like, nobody can read the tablets. That's actually not true. I mean, there's a lot of people that can read these tablets. And I got books in here on how to read the tablets. So that's what's stopping a lot of people from digging into this wisdom and this knowledge, because they think that it's so far out there and it's so ambiguous and nobody knows what these things really say, when that's actually not true. We know exactly what they say, and it's not a mystery. We really, really know. So I just spent a lot of time trying to debunk the debunking of the tablets and getting you to understand that Zechariah Sitchin wasn't really wrong. He was a great researcher. He used existing translations. He didn't translate anything himself. And more people than none know what these tablets say all around the world. It's not a mystery anymore. Okay? And so you see here the Torah, which is the law of God, which is what that actually means. A lot of the stories that came from these ancient tablets made their way into the Torah. Okay? They literally copied, and very poorly as well, a lot of the information from tablets, and they kind of chopped it up and put it in ways, the Council of Nicaea, they put it in ways where, you know, they can coordinate it to where they can utilize it for their own purpose. There's a lot of wisdom and knowledge in there, but at the same time, a lot of it is kind of curated information. Of course, what they did in the Torah was they took out the word gods with an S, and they replaced gods with God singular, because they wanted to only have just one God, when in true reality, there's more than one God. God even said that there's more than one God in the Bible. Okay? And here you go with the ancient Jewish history. You can go to the ancient Jewish history books, you can get them out, or you can go online to the jewishvirtuallibrary.org. Okay, and you can say, well, people are like, well, these people's names aren't in the Bible and the Torah. Oh yeah, they are. I mean, here goes. Look, Marduk. I just did one, and I can do it for so many different names. Just highlight Marduk, 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 Marduk. Enki's in here also. If you look between where some of the highlights are off to the right, you'll see Enki's name. Enki and Marduk are in the Jewish Torah. These people were real people. These weren't fabricated names and fabricated people. They really existed. And Lil's name is in here too. They're all in here. Anu. In the Bible, they're called the Anak. Okay? So, this is the 2 trillion Hubble skybook. And Hubble telescope looked at this one dot in the sky, and when it zoomed into the one tiny dot, it found trillions, 2 trillion galaxies. 2 trillion galaxies in an area the size of the tip of a pen. And what does that tell you guys? Tip of the iceberg, man. You know, at some point we have to drop this egotistical mindset thinking that this earth and us being people on this earth are the center of the universe. Because I guarantee you, we're probably one of the newer rising civilizations in the universe. And that there's a lot of other civilizations that could be millions of years old. Millions. And I estimate that the Anunnaki were at least 1 million years ahead of us technologically, based off the descriptions of the technology that they used when they arrived, and some of the artifacts that have been left behind, and of course the giant temples and structures. I'm estimating 1 million years. They had a good understanding of how to combine spirituality or spiritual energy with technology, and they merged the two together. They also incorporated technology into their bodies. So they had that capability as well, which gave them these godlike functions or features. But in true reality, they were just people with advanced technology. And And so what I'm going to do is next week I'm going to go into our solar system, and I'm going to dig deep into rogue planets. I'm going to dig deep into how the Earth came to be, and a new theory that you probably never heard about with regards to why we find artifacts. When we dig deep into these mines, we find artifacts.
Oh, look, there's my live stream. That's funny.
Hey guys! In today's video, I'm going to be showing you my complete digital painting process. This has been such a requested video, and so many of you have wanted to know exactly how I go from the beginning to the end of a piece, and this is the same process that I use for basically every single digital painting that I make. So it's going to be a long video, but be prepared because I'm going in depth in this video. First off, I did want to mention my sponsor, which is Skillshare. They are amazing. They have supported my channel so many times and they continue to do so. I haven't had time for YouTube videos, however, Skillshare makes it possible for me to devote time to making videos. So if you don't know what Skillshare is, it's an online learning community with thousands of classes in design, illustration, business, photography, anything that you would like to learn how to do. There are going to be professionals teaching classes. Each class is going to have a project that you can complete in which the instructor will be able to look at it and give you their honest feedback about how you did learning their course. And I think it's an extremely wonderful platform for anybody trying to learn new skills, and especially with so many artists now coming to Skillshare, it's incredible. I just want to shout out Sketching Scarlet, which is my friend Lisa. Just because she's super cute, I will have her Skillshare classes down in the description to plan out the composition of the piece and to determine the overall shape that it's going to take on my canvas. I will just tell you the brushes that I use, and I don't really stray from these at all. And for this piece, I'm using only 2 brushes. I'm going to be using a soft round-edged brush and a painting brush that's also round. So I don't really need anything other than these 2 brushes to create a painting, and I'll be explaining how I use them. So I will never use a textured brush for the sketch because it will make it look stiffer and rougher. So once I have a rough idea of the composition and the foundations of the piece, I will create a new layer on top of the previous and use a darker and smaller feathered round brush to start drawing the tight sketch. This is the stage in which using a reference photo is important. It will help you understand the face's proportions more accurately. So in this piece, I personally didn't use a reference photo because I was lazy and I already had an image of what I wanted her facial structure to look like, since I am painting Coraline and she has a pretty iconic facial structure. I kind of made it a little bit more realistic, but I still kept the long nose and sort of a rounder face with a pointed chin. So I already knew what I wanted it to look like, and I personally understand anatomy fairly well, and if you can see the finished piece, it still looks a bit off from reality. So I recommend using reference unless you personally master anatomy. For me, one particular struggle that I had for this piece was drawing the hands, since I didn't use any reference photos. Personally, I still was able to make do, and I can manage to get away with it in an okay fashion, but it would have looked super good if I had taken the time to properly reference the hand and the face. Pro tip, use reference. Don't do what I did, not using reference. It still worked out, but I do have a really good understanding of anatomy, I think. So with that being said, the piece still didn't turn out extremely anatomically correct, so I always recommend using reference. I will usually hide the layer of the first rough sketch since it doesn't really contribute to the final piece at all. If you like it and you think it contributes, just leave it in there, but I usually just will hide the layer. And the next step is going to be on the bottommost layer. In this piece, I'll lay a dark gray and begin adding some rough values, and in my process, I will begin with a grayscale painting and then add color after I've done all the details and I've painted everything. So different people paint different ways. I will paint in grayscale and then add color afterwards, and I'm just going to show you how I do that. This helps me focus on lighting. So in my pieces, I find lighting a lot more interesting than color, so I always like to focus on values and creating interesting lighting situations, and then I'll worry about colors afterwards, and in so doing, I am able to tweak the colors a lot, and if I don't like a particular color scheme, I haven't worked 4 hours on a painting to just be like, darn it, I don't like the colors, I have to start over. I can just erase that layer where I add the colors that might just take me 10 or 20 minutes, and I can start over if I want to. I am still using the same feathered round brush as before, and I'm going to be using light pressure to blend smoothly so that when I begin painting everything, I don't have to work extra hard to blend all the tones. That's kind of my trick, is using a fluffy brush. I don't have to worry about all the hard edges created when I'm laying down all the values. A lot of people will use harder brushes and they kind of like that texture in their pieces. I like it to be very smooth and painterly, and I don't want to see too many harsh lines, so I will just use a soft brush. In this stage, I don't just lay down flat tones, I use it as an opportunity to add shadows and subtle highlights. One thing I would caution you about is don't add harsh highlights until the very end of the painting. What is going to happen is that you're going to begin blending those highlights into the tones around and then lose that pop that you were going for, so you're going to keep going lighter and lighter until you have tones that are way too light for the piece, and it really looks kind of amateurish. So I definitely recommend saving bright highlights for the very end, and it also makes it very satisfying when you can add those highlights at the end. So you very rarely ever need to use pure white in paintings. I very rarely use pure white in paintings. I don't think I have used actually pure white in a painting in, I don't remember, years. So don't worry about using bright white, it's not important. You would be surprised at the impact that darker colors have on your piece. I usually try to go too dark than too light because it's much easier to edit the final piece rather than if I overexposed everything. Once you have all the tones and values where you want them to be, it's time to paint, which is super exciting. I create a new layer over everything, and then I will go back. I think. So with that being said,
Wait, what is she doing?
Plan out the composition of the piece and to determine the overall shape that it's going to take on my canvas. I will just tell you the brushes that I use, and I don't really stray from these at all. For this piece, I'm using only 2 brushes. I'm going to be using a soft round-edged brush and a painting brush that's also round. So I don't really need anything other than these 2 brushes to create a painting, and I'll be explaining how I use them. So I will never use a textured brush for the sketch because it will make it look stiffer and rougher. So once I have a rough idea of the composition and the foundations of the piece, I will create a new layer on top of the previous and use a darker and smaller feathered round brush to start drawing the type sketch. This is the stage in which using a reference photo is important. It will help you understand the face's proportions more accurately. So in this piece, I personally didn't use a reference photo because I was lazy, and I already had an image of what I wanted her facial structure to look like, since I am painting Coraline and she has a pretty iconic facial structure. I kind of made it a little bit more realistic, but I still kept the long nose and sort of the rounder face with a pointy chin. So I already knew what I wanted it to look like, and I personally understand anatomy fairly well, and if you can see the finished piece, it still looks a bit off from reality. So I recommend using reference unless you personally master anatomy. For me, one particular struggle that I had for this piece was drawing the hands, since I didn't use any reference photos. Personally, I still was able to make do, and I can manage to get away with it in an okay fashion, but it would have looked super good if I had taken the time to properly reference the hand and the face. Pro tip, use reference. Don't do what I did, not using reference. It still worked out, but I do have a really good understanding of anatomy, I think. So with that being said, the piece still didn't turn out extremely anatomically correct, so I always recommend using reference. I will usually hide the layer of the first rough sketch, since it doesn't really contribute to the final piece at all. If you like it and you think it contributes, just leave it in there, but I usually just will hide the layer. And the next step is going to be on the bottommost layer. In this piece, I'll lay a dark gray and begin adding some rough values. In my process, I will begin with a grayscale painting and then add color after I've done all the details and painted everything. So, different people paint different ways. I will paint in grayscale and then add color afterwards, and I'm just going to show you how I do that. This helps me focus on lighting. So,
makes a gray layer
to be on the bottommost layer. In this piece, I'll lay a dark gray and begin adding some rough values, and in my process, I will begin with a grayscale painting and then add color after I've done all the details and paint.
Okay, wait a second. So, dark gray. Be there. Color. Gray. Fine. On the bottom. And make it gray. The whole thing. Okay.
Everything. So, different people paint different ways. I will paint in grayscale and then add color afterwards, and I'm just going to show you how I do that. This helps me focus on lighting. So in my pieces, I find lighting a lot more interesting than color. So I always like to focus on values and creating interesting lighting situations, and then I'll worry about colors afterwards, and in so doing, I am able to tweak the colors a lot, and if I don't like a particular color scheme, I haven't worked 4 hours on a painting to just be like, darn it, I don't like the colors, I have to start over. I can just erase that layer where I add the colors that might just take me 10 or 20 minutes, and I can start over if I want to. I am still using the same feathered round brush as before, and I'm going to be using light pressure to blend smoothly so that when I begin painting everything, I don't have to work extra hard to blend all the tones. That's kind of my trick, is using a fluffy brush. I don't have to worry about all the hard edges created when I'm laying down all the values. A lot of people will use harder brushes, and they kind of like that texture in their pieces. I like it to be very smooth and painterly, and I don't want to see too many harsh lines, so I will just use a soft brush. In this stage, I don't just lay down flat tones, I use it as an opportunity to add shadows and subtle highlights. One thing I would caution you about is don't add harsh highlights until the very end of the painting. What is going to happen is that you're going to begin blending those highlights into the tones around, and then lose that pop that you were going for. So you're going to keep going lighter and lighter until you have tones that are way too light.
I'm just trying to learn how to digitally paint, bro.
Kind of amateurish. So I definitely recommend
way you gotta do
saving
you gotta,
bright highlights
you add
for
all
the
the
very end.
highlights,
It
and
also makes it very satisfying when you can add those highlights at the end.
Sure,
So you very rarely ever need to use pure white in paintings. I very rarely use pure white in paintings. I don't think I have used actually pure white in a painting in, I don't remember, years. So don't worry about using bright white, it's not important. you would be surprised at the impact that darker colors have on your piece. I usually try to go too dark than too light because it's much easier to edit the final piece rather than if I overexposed everything. Once you have all the tones and values where you want them to be, it's time to paint, which is super exciting. I create a new layer over everything, and then I will use
okay,
a
wait
soft...
a second, bitch.
Super exciting. Are you ready?
Okay, let's see. Oops, I don't fucking know.
You need a new fucking teacher, bro.
Yeah, I don't like this bitch.
Yeah, this bitch is fucking...
Well, I mean, she can go as fast as she wants, but I still need to figure out. The last dude that I was watching was better.
Can't there just be steps? Techniques?
Well, I figured I'd do this Angelina Jolie because...
Angelina Jolie?
Yeah, look. Wait. Turn off the layer. There. I mean, I don't know, just because I like doing...
You're doing Angelina Jolie?
Faces, I guess.
If it's gonna come out good.
I'm trying. I'm doing a live stream right now, too, just so you know.
Right.
This is streaming the TV, and this camera is streaming my ugly ass face, and then it's also streaming the...
There's a lot of streaming.
The screen. It's just one... Stupid. It's one screen, but it's two little screens, and then the big one. Okay, so... The problem is learning how to use all these fucking different softwares and shit. I think we should start over. Let's start over. Fuck it. Turn that layer off. Shit, I already drew on her face. Whoops. That was an accident. See, because I'm talking about like this shit, right? Like, that takes a lot of blending. When you like all this nose and highlights and the lips.
Is that her face already?
What?
Is that her face already? What are you trying to do?
That's her face.
Yeah.
I just have a picture of it because what I do is I draw over it.
So you're fucking tracing.
Like this, right? Hang on. I'm not using the right brushes. So like I take this and I draw just the main, like the eyes or whatever, the fucking nose, like this, boom, and then the lips, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then turn off this layer and then you have whatever you drew. So, kind of like, not that, kind of like, like this. That's how I got that.
Mm.
I mean, it's a start, you know what I mean? But then, what do you do from here? Like, once you get the
What do you do when you don't have a picture to begin with?
You have to, you don't have a picture at all?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to draw it from memory, right?
Well, that's a fucking bitch.
But, since we have pictures that we can import, then, I'm just trying to learn how to, so once I get it to this part, right, like I can get this part, but then what do you do? Then what do you do when you, to get all these different blends and fucking eyes and...
color.
Huh?
Color.
That's what I'm doing, but there's a certain way to do it. Like this bitch does it weird with her black and her gray.
Yeah, she's doing fucking gray, black, and then she does color after. I don't know how she does all that.
Well, let's watch it. Let's watch and see what she does.
Round, but kind of...
Let's fast forward it to like there and see what she does.
In a piece, don't keep refining it.
So what she's doing right now, she's
the
adding
amount of time
highlights.
that you spend on a piece is irrelevant if the finished product looks good. And if the face took you just 20 minutes to paint and you're satisfied with it, that's awesome. I've made the mistake of overworking pieces just because I didn't think I devoted enough time to them, which in retrospect is so counterproductive. And I really regret that. So if you have a piece that you've worked on for what you consider too little time, but it looks the way you want it to, that's good. Don't do anything else to it. On the flip side of that, if you've been working on a piece for hours and hours and it's going nowhere, maybe the problem lies in your base. If you don't have a good foundation with your sketch and your values, your painting technique might be excellent, but it might not be good enough to save the piece. So make sure that you are satisfied with the sketch and the values before you begin painting. I think that's extremely crucial. Don't make the mistake of seeing a lot of flaws in your sketch and your values and you're like, oh, I'll fix that with details and painting later. One thing that can help you a lot is flipping your image. So by flipping it horizontally, you get to see it in a new perspective, and it's much easier to identify problems if you make it a habit of flipping the canvas every once in a while. If you do it too much, you might become desensitized to seeing the problem, so don't do it too much, I would say. But I think it's a great thing to do if you're kind of stuck in it. I think that something might be off. If you flip it, you will probably see the problem with your anatomy or your composition.
It looks good.
So once all of that is out of the way and you have your grayscale painting finished, you have all the details, it's time to color. Adjustment layers are going to be your best friend from this point onward. You're literally just going to be adding filters to this piece, like the same way that you would do it to a photo that you're going to post to Instagram. You're just going to be adding filters. This is the fun part. This is super easy, and you get to experiment a lot with this. First off, for this piece, I wanted to add a little bit more brightness emanating from the moon. So I added a new layer that was a color dodge layer, and I just used a soft round brush to add a little bit of lightness back into the piece. I kept the opacity of this color dodge layer pretty low because I didn't want a crazy dramatic scene, but it's up to you whatever you do depending on your subject and your piece. And so next I'm going to start adding colors, and that I do on the soft light adjustment layer. So with the same soft round brush again, I will begin painting different colors and tones that I want in the piece. This part takes some fiddling around with, and you will just have to figure out how to best choose colors. I can't really explain it, but if you just look at the colors I'm selecting on the color wheel for this step, it should help you a little bit. It's not going to be like you want the skin tone to be peachy, so you're going to go on the color wheel and choose a peachy skin tone. You're going to kind of have to choose something a little darker and more saturated than you would imagine you need for that, and it's going to show up on the soft light layer differently. It's very hard to explain, but if you mess around with it, you'll get the hang of it really quickly. And
colors of like peach,
one problem you're going to have is that the colors will be pretty dull, but that's totally okay. What I do for that is I will duplicate that layer and turn down the opacity to around half. So this will add more vibrancy to the colors and have them look a little bit more like what you want them to look like. However, I'm sure they're still going to be pretty dark and not exactly how you envision the piece to look. But this is where we're going to add more adjustment layers. And so I'm going to use more adjustment layers to begin tweaking the hue, the saturation, and the color curves. Feel free to play around. There isn't a specific way to use filter layers, but I mainly focus on the color adjustment curves. First, I'll adjust the brightness and the contrast with the RGB curve, and then I'll go through each individual channel and play around until I get the desired end product. It's completely up to you.
It's so crazy.
Just something you have to fiddle around with. I can't tell you how to best do it, but it's really fun to do. So I think you're gonna have a good time with it. You can leave the piece here if you're content with it. I usually will, but for this painting, I wanted to add just a couple more details.
I watched a thing. A digital artist said that he's been doing digital art for however long professionally. He can't even go to painting.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
For this piece, I was getting tired and I wanted to.
He said he could. He said the shit that he does, he couldn't even take.
It's almost like they don't even know art.
For the night, and then to return to it in the morning when I'm focused again. I'm very happy I did because the piece ended out pretty cute and much more how I envisioned it. I played around with the adjustment layers again, and when I was pleased with the tones, I created a new normal layer over everything and began refining details with the same painterly oil brush that I used before. The technique I used for this part is the same as before when I was just painting details on the grayscale layer, using the color picker and a light touch to blend everything properly. I just went over a lot of the details that I left unfinished and in a sloppier state, and once I was finished cleaning everything up, I signed my name. So that is my full process for digital paintings. I always use the same brush and techniques. The only thing that really changes between paintings is how many layers I will use per piece. For bigger paintings or ones with more details, I will use a lot more layers just to be on the safe side. So for this one, I did use 17 layers. They just kind of stack up on top of each other. You're not going to realize you're doing it, so don't be stressed about it. But for smaller studies and sketches, I honestly might just use 2 or 3 total layers. It's up to you. It doesn't matter how many you use at all if you have the desired product. Don't feel pressured to put in a million layers or to just work on 1 or 2 because you want it to be closer to traditional drawing. If you want to do traditional drawing, just do traditional drawing. Don't focus on digital painting. The tools like the Control-Z and the color picker and the layers that you have in digital paintings are what makes digital painting its own art form and its own medium. So take advantage of those and don't shy away from them. Okay, my throat hurts because I've been talking for forever, and I really hope that I conveyed my painting process to you clearly. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I will do my best to answer any if I know the answer. And of course, check out the link in my description for the free 2-month trial to Skillshare. Thank you so much to them. I appreciate it. I'm so sorry that I've been gone for so long, but I'm doing my best to come back. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks so much for still being here after 2 months of being gone. But I will hopefully talk to you guys soon. I try to keep posting videos and hopefully, I've just finished 2 online classes. I will have a little bit.
Them come pick me up.
Oh, they come and pick you up?
Yeah, but I have to get up super early.
Drop you off?
Yeah, but I have to get up super early.
Why? At the same time?
Because they have to pick me up at.
Oh, even earlier. Oh, that's stupid.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. To be ready at 9. Yeah, when I could just drive myself. But
what time do you have to be there?
I think 10.
So wouldn't you have to leave at 9 anyway?
Yeah, but yeah, I guess.
And they drop you off right away after, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what the fuck are you talking about? So.
Fuck you and yourselves. Fuck you and yourselves. Okay, this guy. This guy is dope.
Who's that?
Welcome back to the channel. So first off, before we get started, you get to witness my quarantine haircut that we shaved on.
But yeah, fuck your quarantine haircut, dude. Start drawing.
The best ways
watch
to
what this dude starts out with and what it becomes. It's fucking crazy.
Slow to still be able to tell what's going on, and I can kind of talk about what I did previously.
Yeah, which is
so basically I showed you a quick picture of what we're going to be working on, what I'm getting the inspiration from. So what I usually want to do right off the bat is have, you know, really finding the forms of the face. I have like a picture in my head on what I want to do, and I really want to just do quick lines all over this thing. I want to keep my hand moving.
We're gonna do 1.5
all over the canvas. I'm not gonna spend too much time like on the nose or the ear or the mouth or anything like that. I just want to keep working and keep moving. I think nice, loose, quick lines to start a piece is one of the best ways to handle anything, and it gives your piece a lot of energy off the get-go. I think if you start really stiff, it's hard. You can't really loosen it up later, you know. I think as you render a piece, it's gonna harden up on its own. So it's good to stay.
Whatever out of his mind. He's not even like using a template or anything. He's
just going
clean as you line drawing the whole thing. I would like to kind of spend time.
It's a bunch of fucking lines. Can't even.
That's like a regular artist.
Yeah, but watch what he turns it into.
Because you're doing something else, you feel guilty that you're not creating as much, and I'm completely guilty of that myself. So I felt even guiltier that I wasn't creating, I wasn't producing content, I hadn't been streaming, and so I just want to bring it up to everybody else that I think we all share that, and I just don't really want people to not be so hard on themselves because it's I think a lot of art.
Took a whole. Okay, wait, hang on. Let's go a little bit more. Okay,
on her eyes, you can tell from this flip. I think the face is still pretty skewed.
So
it's not totally balanced.
Adds like some color and some spots.
Try tackling and fix.
Then he fucking.
Same thing.
He does some other shit.
Brain down sometimes. It's like, yeah, you want your brain to go really fast at the beginning to kind of hit up all these different.
Come on, let's keep going. He just like it's 30 minutes.
Trick. Yeah, so before I render anymore, you just kind of look over and notice that so much wasn't rendered, and I want to kind of.
That's almost like a regular artist that does it, like sketching and then sketching gets away.
Look at how fucking
I had that kind of little swoopy one to the right. I just felt like
it
feels like super real.
How sick is that?
I didn't.
Man, he was like, dude, really? You turned that into
that? I wanted to keep this loose, but still having kind of anatomy that made sense. But I didn't want to get too crazy with it.
How the fuck did he do that, bro? Here's the end.
Look at that. I'll see you in the next one. We'll meet people next week. I hope you liked the piece and enjoyed watching the process. Guys, thank you so much. Hope you guys are...
From nothing.
Yeah, some people are just artists, bro. Like,
I don't know if I could do that, bro.
Yeah, I mean, like, cause you gotta come up with some shit. Like,
yeah.
I'm just trying to find a lot of like hairlines and movement shape. Also, kind of trying to figure out some anatomy stuff. You know, it's also good to do a nice flip as soon as possible. You don't want to wait too long. Because then you always got people
I'm gonna draw a bitch with horns who's blindfolded.
Color, like.
I used to have a big problem with that way back early in my career, where I would take way too long to flip the canvas and then have to do a lot of fixing down the road. It would always scare me when I realized I worked on a piece for 8 hours without flipping it once. It's almost like you didn't want to do it. So I'm still trying to figure out a lot of the hair shapes. I'm still staying in the sketch phase, not trying to clean up too early. I remember when I first started sketching it, I actually did this piece this morning. I was going for like a really long neck at first. I ended up shortening it up a bit, just because it looked a little too crazy once I started rendering. So I didn't spend too long in this phase. And you'll actually even see that I actually didn't spend a lot of time at all in the black and white. I'm actually trying to spend less time in the black and white as I used to. I feel like I can skip a couple steps and knock some time off a piece if I just can get into the color. So what I usually do with any piece, you know, I have that kind of original loose drawing. We'll kind of knock it back a layer and then spend this time to do like a little bit of a cleaner line drawing. I don't have to go crazy. You know, I'm not doing like a super clean, edgy line drawing for the whole thing. I would like to kind of spend time and figure out a lot of shapes. You know, when I paint and draw, I create a lot of this stuff kind of as I go. I have a loose idea to start, but a lot of the shapes and color and light, I kind of figure it out, you know, throughout the entire process. You know, I'll figure out what works and what doesn't, and then maybe I'll get some ideas for a different part of the painting as I go. So that's always part of it too. I'm trying to find some more specific shapes on how the ears are working. There was some very unique looking ears in an original sketch, so I thought that was pretty cool. You know, like always, I want to find at least some cool hair shapes that I can have some fun with. That's always super important to me. And there's actually a couple things I want to talk about even while the sketch is going on. And I talked to a couple other artists recently, and I think it's something that I think a lot of us should be talking about, is how do you stay creative, you know, when life gets a little crazier, gets a little more stressful, you know, and it's something that I've had to deal with the past few weeks, especially since we're all second side. I think we're on about 5 weeks here, and for me, I had a really hard time, at least the first few weeks, feeling creative and pushing myself to draw. I felt like some projects fell to the side. It's hard when reality gets a little more real, you know, if that makes sense, and how you spend time engrossed into a painting of a weird elf,
dude,
right? So, but as, you know, things change, get back
bro.
to feeling like yourself again. It's been easier for me to kind of crack open and get that creative juice again. I think the biggest thing I want to bring up is don't feel guilty about it. I think it's easy for a lot us, most artists, to feel guilty when we're not painting, even when it's normal out. You know, if we feel like we're playing too many games or doing something else, you feel guilty that you're not creating as much. And I'm completely guilty of that myself, so I felt even guiltier that I wasn't creating, I wasn't producing content, I hadn't been streaming. And so I just want to bring it up to everybody else that I think we all share that. And I just don't really want people to not be so hard on themselves, because I think a lot of artists are through a lot of this. But we'll find our footing again and find our creativity and get back into doing what we love. And I'm really starting to kind of feel that energy and creation myself right now. And so in this piece, I actually felt a lot of it coming back to me. So I think sometimes it might just take 1 or 2 pieces to really kind of fall in love with what we've been doing for so many years, right? So I think it's a good discussion. You guys can always throw down in the comments below how you're feeling, how your creativity's doing. You know, I think it's a good time for us to kind of all hone our skills, being at home and staying healthy and safe and all that, and really kind of push ourselves. You know, I would like to actually work on some different ways of tackling some characters in the future. Maybe work on some more really clean line drawings with doing some like flat color shapes underneath. You know, I wouldn't mind kind of changing my own process. So right here, you see, I actually didn't spend a ton of time in black and white. You know, I tried to get some of that red light layer, and I've actually been toning down that a little bit, but the piece that was shown actually had a lot of that happening, so I figured we could take advantage. So right here, I really want to just splash around as much kind of color as I can, real quick. Almost the same idea as when we were sketching at first. I almost want to do the same thing with color. You know, I'm just splashing some reds and blues around, so some areas that might feel cooler. I knew I wanted it to be a light piece, like especially on a whitish background. I didn't want the contrast to be too crazy, but I didn't know kind of what colors I was going to be doing in her hair. And I also had the same idea in my head that like I didn't want the pinks and peach colors to also look like the same as her flesh. It might get confusing around her face if it just looked all the same. So I was trying to think of kind of like what kind of like really platinum blonde with some pinks in there, what that might look and read like. So I'm really kind of using some pretty heavy shapes and brush strokes over a lot of the line drawing. So I don't mind too much, because I know I'm going to kind of paint in more line drawing after the fact to kind of figure out where those little strands of hairs are, right? And so this I can kind of slow down a little bit. I don't have to be so manic about the entire piece. I can kind of figure out like, oh, we can do these shapes on the lips. And so one other thing I actually noticed when I was working on the piece is I was putting a complete blindfold on her, and then I was looking at the other piece, and it looked like you could see her eyes slightly. I thought that was pretty cool, because I think a character can lose a lot if you don't see any eyes at all. But I didn't want it to be like some weird transparent plastic on her face, so you want to totally see her eyes. But I figured getting the shape of and placement of her eyes right here might kind of help me figure out what we want to do. I think at one point I actually kind of slowly erase most of them, since it kind of changed the direction of the piece. It's always worth trying some things, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. You know, it's easy to just erase or knock that layer right off. I think I was kind of messing with what I might be doing. And a lot of my process right now is kind of cleaning up the line drawing underneath, which is actually part of the process of my own that kind of drives me crazy. That's something I might be kind of looking to fix. So I'm really looking at a lot of kind of the negative space between the hairs and how they interact with the face, and if they feel pretty good, and then refiguring out some of the folds on the mask and how they might kind of overlay on her eyes. You can tell from this flip, I think the face is still pretty skewed. It's not totally balanced. I think that's something I'll definitely go back and try to tackle and fix. The same thing, I'm trying to build up my values pretty slow also. Like, she's gonna have pretty light skin, but I want to kind of at least paint out a lot of those kind of like gray sketch marks underneath. It can be a little distracting, and sometimes it's hard to make decisions while still seeing those. One thing I always like to do too with the upper lips, I like to have a slight fade on the top of the upper lip. I don't like it to have like a nice, like to have a hard edge line. And so it's usually lately trying to find these little areas of a person's face that I can kind of do these small little tweaks to make them feel a little bit better. I kind of give myself like little small goals with every painting, how I either tackle the nostrils or maybe like kind of reapproach how I tackle kind of a lower lip or the shadow underneath the lip. It's something I've tried to be semi-focused on. And usually right now, I'm not like 100% sure kind of where I'm going with a lot of it, but I just know I can slowly tackle each part, kind of one step at a time, and then hope I can kind of find my way through the piece. So I think even at ×3 right now, I think it's a good speed to watch this. I think at normal 1x could probably drag out a little bit, because there might be periods where I just stare at it. We want a little bit more than that. So it's really carving out, trying to figure out where the nostrils are. I think it's really just slowing your brain down sometimes. It's like, yeah, you want your brain to go really fast at the beginning to kind of hit up all these different parts of the body and the face, but like, if you're working on a nose or working on a mouth, slow down and get specific, like kind of mentally on like, why is this nostril doing this? Why is it curving in here? Why is there a little bit of light hitting right here? And really just spend time and focus on that. So I'm slowly trying to figure out so many shapes of the hair. I can start to tell that after I kind of covered up one of the eyes, that some of the direction where I was going was starting to go in a place that I like. I can tell when I was working on it that like, I was starting to feel that momentum. You know what I mean? You guys were working on a piece and it feels like you're kind of like lost in the woods or you're just treading water. You're like, I don't know where this is going, but something hits at one point. You put like a certain part of lighting in, or the contrast is working really well, and you're like, oh, and this is starting to actually come together. And then you get excited, and then it's basically all you want to work on until you finish. Like, you can't work on any other art till you are at least close to finishing that one. You know, I think once I started that left side of the face and filling out the hair here, I started to feel that kind of energy that I liked where this was going. I could kind of tell. I think especially once I started getting a little bit more of the pinks added into the hair, started feeling pretty good. And also, by the way, so the brushes used on this really is just my DG main and the DG underbrush, which you can check out, link below for all the brushes that I use on almost every painting you see here. It's the exact same brush pack. I use that DG main a lot on my paintings. Probably overuse it, but it paints the way that I'm painting right now, and so I don't really have a ton of reasons to use another one. It just works for me right now. So it's really kind of just like cascading my way across the painting, trying to fill in these little gaps. It's like, how's this little hair strand work right here? How's it working right here? And continually up the forehead, I might bounce back and see some shapes that I like, see some colors that I like, and it's always kind of like figuring out where else can work in the piece. Yeah, so same thing, so just trying to model the size of the hair. And at one point, you know, I always know in my head that I have to venture across the painting and almost do the exact same thing on the other side, which can kind of like be mentally draining sometimes, but you know, you have to go there and tackle it. So sometimes I'm always trying to figure out, you know, how dark do I make the shadow underneath the lower lip. Sometimes you can get pretty extreme with that shadow, sometimes you can be more subtle with it. So that's something that I've been playing with lately, and also the shadow underneath the nose. You know, sometimes you can go too extreme with those shadows. Sometimes you don't have to have anything at all. And I actually decided to kind of break from like a real mask. I felt like these cuts in the mask gave like a nice little shape to it, even if a normal mask wouldn't have a cut and fold in that unless it was like glued to her face. I just liked how it looked, and you know, sometimes that just wins out. If you like how it looks and it still fits into the realm of believability within your piece, then I think it's worth doing. So I knew I was gonna jam in some. I felt like getting some more saturated color underneath her jaw and her chin, and really kind of figuring that area out, and that really spoke to me a lot. I wanted to kind of jam that out all over. Especially once I start getting some actual lighting on her neck, because you always want to make sure your head feels like it's coming forward from your neck, right? And it's not sitting on this exact same plane. And so that's how I kind of figure out a lot of colors as I go. So some of that kind of saturated pink that I have down below, I kind of tucked into sections of her hair above. So kind of was popping from the top and the bottom, was kind of, your eyes are kind of bouncing between with her face right in the middle. So that's why I kind of figure out so much as I go. That's why my thumbnails and everything are probably such a mess. I just like discovering the piece as I work on it. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it definitely does not. But it's a nice little adventure to go on sometimes. And same thing, I want to bring some of that into the bottom of her horns. I thought it'd be pretty cool. You know, I think even at the end of the piece, I could have put a lot more time into the horns, but I don't think they actually needed it. I felt like it was fine without. They did the trick, they're readable what they were. I think you could totally overwork a part of a painting that may not be super important. I think kind of leaving those loose brush strokes are pretty nice sometimes. So same thing, I'm just cleaning up a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of like undersketch down below that I'm trying to clean up. And I just still want her face to feel like it has like form and kind of some highlighted areas, even if they're subtle. So you'll see me kind of go back and forth a lot trying to work all those areas. And sometimes I do spend a lot of time having a real gradual blend on the bottom of the chin and the jaw, because it's important that it looks like it kind of slowly bends around and then goes back, and it's not like a super hard edge. You know, sometimes a hard edge will be totally fine, but other times I like to, especially if it's rendered out enough, I want to feel like it lives in space. So me, I had to spend a little bit of time figuring out how her neck should actually be shaped. Before, I kind of had it too much like some weird tube coming down, so it's good to kind of figure out where all the muscles are. And you know, that's actually one thing too. I don't spend a ton of time on her shoulders and collarbone area. I kind of give some general shapes. I just didn't think it was the focus of the piece. I think sometimes the loose brush strokes down there was kind of doing the trick. Yeah, so before I render any more, you just kind of look over and notice that so much wasn't rendered, and I wanted to kind of at least get some color in there. But even her hair, even how I tackle her hair is a lot how I tackle even the characters I do with very long hair. You know, just trying to find these larger silhouettes and then slowly kind of cut lines to figure out some more interesting, smaller shaped areas of hair. And then kind of figure out where those shadows are and what highlights, and then kind of create unique shapes that are interesting to me within the hair. And that's why I love painting hair so much. It's almost like just working on some weird abstract piece. You don't have to worry too much about muscles or real lighting. You know, you just have to make shapes that feel nice and that work. And so really just kind of brushing in pretty much some quick color and shape. I go back and clean that up when I can. Make sure it's kind of, some of the edges are soft enough, and it's really just getting some small blending. If you guys want, I have a really small YouTube tutorial on blending. It's really simple. It's really just kind of how I blend a lot of little areas together, since I use the same brush. So you can definitely check that out in my video library.
Don't realize that the guy there, the security guy,
is ever curious on how I blend.
And a gun.
I haven't seen it in a while, but I'm sure it's pretty much the same. So same thing with the hair. I'm just trying to like just kind of carve in these little lines, kind of break up those little shapes at the top.
Got shot and went to the hospital like a half hour later. He died.
And so really just going through for a piece and finding cleanup. You know, I was pretty happy with the time the piece took. You know, it really was, I think, a little under 2 hours. I think the full recording was an hour and 50 minutes, which was still a pretty good time for me. And I'm not trying to like speed paint this. I'm usually always trying to kind of clean my process to get to a result faster. That's usually something any art director or client always appreciates if you can work faster, but it's not usually something I'm just trying to do for the sake of painting quick. And this is actually an easier process for me to record and then kind of do voiceover after instead of talking while painting. This way I can actually concentrate on the painting a little bit more. And actually for this one, this was actually broken up in like 7 parts. Especially with the family home, I have to stop painting constantly, turn the recording off, stop painting, come back, recording on, and keep going. So if you guys like this type of format and complete commentaries from start to finish, definitely let me know down below. I know this is pretty long for YouTube video.
Yeah, one of the camera.
We'll have quick tutorials also, and then maybe some more of these in-depth ones. You know, people have a little more time to kill at home, so maybe just pop this on in the background and kind of watch this whole process. I think if you can take even like a little thing from it, that's pretty major. See, it's really kind of falling in love with these little lines I can start carving into the hair. I can tell it's adding that little thick line where it looks like it has like a little bit of depth on that part of the hair. Those are like the parts that I really love. And I spent a little bit of time at the end really finding some really nice clean line areas where I can make shapes pop out. So this was going back and add a little bit more highlights to bring contrast, to bring the skin out a little bit here. Same with, I just kind of use that, I think, the airbrush. I always have to be careful with that because you can soften up too much. Usually when I do use that brush, I go in and make some more hard-edged areas. And say I'm back to the DG main. Even with this, get a little texture on it. And I actually don't mess with her eyes that much. They felt like it was subtle enough from this sketch before that I almost didn't even touch it throughout this entire painting. I was afraid to make it too rendered or cover it up too much. It just seemed to work. I think just constantly painting over a piece, you have like little treasures that you leave underneath that can bleed through into the painting. And I feel like that was always something even from working in oil way back that kind of came through with even my digital work. So I was trying some cool ways to just bring some more interest into these little parts of hair. I think sometimes if the value of it looked too close to the skin, maybe we could try some different ways to bring that light out. You know, I want to get a nice little shine to the hair at the top. You just keep exploring those little sections. And I actually really enjoyed kind of how monochromatic we were going with the piece. I think there was something kind of like soft and sweet about all of it that I was really, really enjoying actually. And even you can find some really small little areas of saturated color to kind of pop in, and you can always give it like a little bit more interest. And so it's the same thing, doing a lot of cleanup, trying to figure out kind of how the hair on the opposite side is going to work and where do the little kind of lines flow to. But I think going back, I like a little bit more of these kind of like sharp edges around the mask or the hair. You know, I do incorporate a lot of kind of like full rendering and line to my work. And it's kind of just the way my style has evolved these past couple years, but I do really enjoy it. I don't feel like the line work flattens it out so much that it's distracting. And I think that's always a balance you have to play with. You know, there's a lot of lines or rim light that you can do to a piece that really can flatten it out and really be a distraction to the piece. And that's something I'm constantly trying to remind myself of. You know, especially with these lips too, like you can do too much of line and really kind of, the depth will kind of disappear, right? I think even right here I was trying to think of maybe putting some like texture on the face with some certain brushes. And I think I left a little bit there for a little bit, but I might have got rid of it later. I think it was just, I kind of liked how smooth and delicate the skin felt right now. I didn't want to start getting too much on top of it. So really, the entire process that you've seen so far is almost the exact same process for the rest of the piece. It's just like looking at this little area, how does this compare to this? And a lot of people ask me a lot, like, how do I know when a piece is done? It's usually when like the little parts of the piece aren't bothering me anymore. Like obviously, if you look at her right hair with all the sketch right there, that's not done, right? Especially when you look to the left. So I know I have to clean up all the sketchiness, at least get it to match a quality on the left. And usually to the point where the piece isn't like bothering me anymore, it feels okay. You know, and a lot of the shapes feel right to me. Sometimes that's what can tell me that a piece is done. So we do a lot of these highlights. A lot of them might not even make sense, but the shapes feel pretty cool to me. I like the composition that they create in the piece. And you have to spend a little bit of time, go in and, you know, render out these ears. These ears are crazy, but I like how kind of crazy they are. I think it adds a lot of interest and unique qualities to the piece that the piece might not have. If she just had normal elf ears or human ears, you know, they're kind of like demon ears or something. I don't know what they are. They kind of scare me. I like them. I know at one point, I'm pretty sure I reduced how far the hair is on that side that I'm painting right now. I think it felt like it was too far out. It probably didn't make too much sense. You know, it's funny even looking at the piece now. I think there might have been some different ways to, on her left side, to extend the hair out so it looked like it more kind of wisped out to the side. Because it almost looks like you could cut those wisps out and then her hair would still work. It's almost like a different element to her hair, but I think if you look at any piece later down the road, you can think of different ways to tackle something that you didn't see in the moment while you were painting. And even for the ears, I kind of just make some kind of weird earlobe shapes. I don't get too specific for it. I don't think it's probably that necessary. Now, human ears, you should probably get pretty specific, look at some ear reference, figure out where those folds are. But for these, like, kind of crazy ears, you can kind of just get something going. Yeah, I'm sure there's some better, quicker ways to tackle like these larger areas. But, you know, you find a process that works for you. You know, it's easy to stick to. So I think at one point I just snapped. I'm like, I know these sketchy lines are not going to be here. I just need to get rid of them. It's hard to make decisions on the rest of the piece with these crazy things all over the place. And so you can kind of carve outside of your painting with the outside color too, which is always a nice technique and, you know, something you do a lot with traditional work. That's a crazy line. I think I realized that ear was actually a lot smaller than the other ear. I kind of looked at where the bottom of it was compared to the other, and that's why you saw the quick line come out, and realized it was actually almost like a third of the way up compared to the other. And I actually liked how large that one is, especially when you tilt your head up like that. Your ears are going to be a little bit lower. Usually your nose kind of lines up with the bottom of your ear, but if you tilt your head up, they're going to shift down on your head bit. And so same thing, just cleaning up the top of the hair. I'm kind of slowly trying to get rid of all that sketch stuff, and then once I get rid of a lot of that under sketch, I feel like I can spend more time just cleaning up the painting itself. That's usually my favorite part. I feel like on this stage, I'm usually kind of going through the motions. I kind of turn into like a rendering robot, and I kind of go to like a daydream state and just start slowly pushing this out. I think I do want to start to get some more kind of saturated color. I knew what the palette was at this point between these pinks and whites, and you know, even like the cool grays, I thought was enough. And I think I kind of tweaked her other horn too, because there actually ones have spaced out a lot further than the other. You know, I want to get more light on the upper cheek and the cheekbone. Even though our cheekbone's kind of underneath her hair, but there's usually a couple highlights I like to get in a portrait if I can. You know, I definitely want, you know, highlight on the nose, some highlights on the lower lip, and then sometimes you can get some on the chin. But sometimes I always feel like you get too much on the chin, it can take away from the highlights everywhere else. So sometimes I try to leave the chin a little bit more subtle. But then I kind of go in and tackle some of those kind of subtle folds in your lips and your mouth. and then kind of going back under and really figuring out these little hair shapes. And sometimes some of these little random hairs that you just kind of, I don't know, you just kind of see it. Like, I had that kind of little swoopy one to the right. I just felt like it just needed like a little something kind of dangling there, because it give it like a little bit more life. I think if you don't have a couple of these little stragglers, that she might look like she has too much of a, you know, like a Lego hair or something. Sometimes I try to get some of those in. You know, I really want to try to get pretty close to the hairstyle from the original artist. And then I like having these kind of highlights that I paint in between the hair shapes that have already previously been done. And I just get a little bit on the horn. Like I said, I don't spend much time rendering on the horn at all. Oh yeah, that's something I actually saw. So it actually looked like her head was a little shifted on the top. There's always a pain when you do it on the stage, especially how I paint hair. So you have all these lines that kind of break apart if you start doing shenanigans like that. But, you know, it's going to bother me if I don't do it. So sometimes you just have to suck it up and paint it. Now it's getting even fatigued on some parts of this painting, just like even painting the other horn, just because the horn's not like super interesting for me to paint, especially how loose I'm trying to make them. So I'm trying just to go through the motions. I kind of just mentally copy the motions that I did for the other horn. So this is the same deal where I'm trying to really kind of polish these little areas and really figure out some nice little line drawing shapes. And I have such a blast at this part of the painting. You know, that the fear of creating something that might not work isn't there anymore, and you're really just like a kind of a free fall of fun and polish here. You know, finding how far can I push like the really dark red lines. You know, what little areas of highlights can we add that really make the piece pop. You know, I was always thinking about the ears. I was like, yeah, you know, I can make the ears so they don't exactly match. I think that'd be cool. They got cuts and folds in different areas. You know, I don't know if she had them in battle or what her deal is. I don't really know too much of a story for her right now, but she's such a great character. I really like her already. Like, it definitely feels like a history to her. Whether it's like she's been through so much, either it's been pain or something. She looks tired. Yeah, it's the same deal. I think for this part, I actually thought about bringing up her eye mask past that shape where her bangs are. I think I brought it up even like a little bit further in her head. I thought that might have been pretty cool. Because it really is just finding like line cleanup, more highlights, and more dark areas. You know, you always want to push a piece. You start in the middle, you push the darks a little bit further, the highlights a little bit further, and you just keep expanding that more and more and more until you have, you know, where your values start feeling pretty good. And so this is a piece where I actually enjoyed not spending so much time in black and white. I feel like so much of my exploration was in the color, finding what colors worked, and I think not only did I save myself a lot of time, I think the piece might have come out, you know, a little bit more fun and loose in the color stage, because I didn't. Yeah, so just I wanted to keep this loose, but still having kind of anatomy that made sense, but I didn't want to get too crazy with it. I think on the original one, she has this kind of like X white scar on her shoulder. I did like maybe a couple minutes of polish after the recording, so you'll see in the final there might be like a couple small things. I think I got that in the piece. Yeah, I just want to keep it loose with some nice little shapes, just kind of cut in, kind of. The focus of the piece isn't at the bottom, right? And then I can go back around and really kind of figure out this little small stuff. And that's pretty much most of the piece, guys. I can't believe it's already been over 30 minutes of this. So if you guys like this process, I'll show you guys the final, and I'll give you guys a link to what the final looks like on my Instagram if you want to check that out. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. And I will see you in the next one. We'll have a new tutorial out next week. I hope you liked the piece and enjoyed watching the process. Guys, thank you so much. Hope you guys just keep staying out there, keep painting. Love you guys.
Fuck you.
Hey everyone, Dave Greco here, and welcome back to the channel. So what I want to do today, and we're just really going to kind of hop back into it, is take the drawing that we did the other day. We spent about 25 minutes or so on this, just getting some type of design done. And we're going to try to spend about an hour, and I'm going to tackle kind of how I lay in value and color and everything like that. So we're going to start in a little small cam here, and then let's just dive into it. So really just have a relaxing morning. Let's see what we can do. All right, and as we get started for this, I'll push this a little closer. This video is sponsored by Wacom once again. They are big supporters of the channel lately, and I super appreciate it. People ask me what I use a lot of the time when I create my own work, and it is the 27-inch Wacom Cintiq, which I've used for a few years now, which I absolutely love. So we'll have some links down below if you're looking to check out their products. Please use those links. It helps me a lot. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So basically, when we start a piece like this, I like to think of a few things. Kind of, what kind of mood do I want to set? I get like a general idea of what kind of colors I might want to use. And then like, let's start pretty desaturated and then build up our colors. Okay, so right now I actually have this drawing right here, this layer on as a multiply layer, especially since it wasn't, the outline wasn't created separately. So we kind of just paint some local color right underneath it. And I'm gonna use kind of this solid brush, just for now. And we're gonna lay some color in, but we're gonna keep it pretty muted. You know, I think the best bet we can even do is just kind of go over this entire thing. It's just so much easier on our eyes too once we kind of got rid of so much of that, it being so bright. And I don't mind if we're like a little sloppy right now. We'll kind of just paint around some of this, and we can always fade some of this out later. If you notice, I did actually spend like just a minute or two. I took out the upper eyeballs. It just felt like it wasn't really adding much to the piece, and it was a little distracting. I want to kind of keep more focus and light down towards the bottom here. Like I said, it doesn't matter too much if you're kind of messy at this stage. I always find that this is a great way to add a little kind of detail and color almost by accident in your piece. You're just kind of looking at it real quick, adding little pops around. See what works, see what doesn't. And this always feels like a kind of a good little start. And then we can obviously keep pushing it even further. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to create another layer, because I do like to create about 1 million of these things. And we'll go up to the airbrush here, but I want that kind of a gradient of darkness at the top coming down. But I want it to be a little cooler, so we'll go kind of more into the blue here. And stay pretty saturated. And I just kind of want to fade all this coming down. I want to kind of have this more kind of like a spotlight kind of light looking on the bottom of his face. And then you can always come back and add like a little bit more color up here if you want like a little bit more blue popping out near the top. It looks like I'm looking at both monitors. Sometimes I like to look at it in I record this in OBS, and so I like to look at the preview window sometimes. It gives me kind of 2 different monitors I'm looking at, which helps. And I know I'm actually probably going to do this kind of, this eye is probably gonna have our biggest pop of color in it. And I kind of have an idea of this kind of like light grayish, kind of ashy skin tone. It's going to work, stay pretty desaturated, and then we can have some pop, these little glowing parts on it. That's really going to make that piece pop out. So let's make another layer, an overlay layer. It's usually only 2 types of layers that I make, are these 2. And I would like to go around, you know, we can just use a normal DG main or something. Now I kind of want that orange in there to kind of give us a little bit more kind of Halloween vibes. And I just want to start popping out a little bit of this tone around. Like, I'm not sure if this is going to be the color we end up going with or what, but it's something to start with. And you can still be kind of messy with it. At one point we will be painting kind of over the black and white, or the line drawing I should say. We'll try to just kind of keep this moving. Now maybe I'll bring this into some of the teeth down here. I kind of bring like a little variation of like pinks and purples because, you know, God, I love it. Just around maybe some of these edges. Kind of see what happens with it. Having some kind of like issues with 2021 where it looks like the screen kind of blinks, and it's usually going to go full screen like that, so we're going to have to kind of figure that out. We can just work like this for now. I think we can bring in some of this over here too. You know, at first I talked about before having this almost be like a plate on his face, but it might be cool just to have it be the skin itself right here. And we'll kind of see. We'll see what works, what doesn't. And we're just slowly kind of trying to build up a little bit of focus here. And you can get some kind of quick results that can kind of lead you in a specific direction, which is always kind of nice. And then once you get kind of these areas, it can give you some more ideas of how you actually want to proceed and take this piece further. All right, so we're still just kind of moving around. We'll give it the old flip here, which is always good. I do always manage to seem to have a lot of glare in this office in the morning. But hopefully everyone's having a good week. It's good to be able to get some videos out for everybody. Hopefully just, you know, even seeing some process like this helps a bit. You know, it's really the most that I feel like I can do for the channel lately is just kind of give you so much kind of just real-time, down-to-earth content as possible. It might not have a lot of glitz and flash to it, but I really am trying to just help people kind of work on their skills, and if they can progress into their career paths a little bit easier. I can kind of update everybody on kind of everything that's going on for myself as well, career-wise, because we have been freelance for about a month and a half now, and things have certainly gotten super, super crazy. The workload that is coming in is quite overwhelming, really? And I have a very bad habit of taking way too much on. So we're gonna make a overlay layer. I just want to we're trying to find results fast here so we can show this process. This is a piece that could realistically take me like a full day of work if I was gonna spend like 6-7 hours. So let's see how much we can get done in an hour or so. Whereas times we might be able to kind of sit and write about an area a little bit longer. I might not be able to as much right now. And so, yeah, but as far as work goes, It's been crazy. I have a problem taking too much on, but I'm super excited to share with everybody what we have been working on whenever that actually happens. It's pretty much been working on some of my favorite like products and IPs and clients that I've always wanted to have and has been happening, and it's really amazing. I have a lot of you to thank for helping me push all my skills and everything further. It's truly it's helped me so much. I've even had a little bit of trouble trying to find time to stream on Twitch lately, just because we've been so slammed with work. All right, so this is gonna give us kind of a loose idea, and now we take the same overlay layer, and we're just gonna, I think I want to do this kind of like bright light that looks like it's coming up from the bottom. Like we just have this kind of focus down here, and we can just go to a normal layer. I want this kind of on top of everything, so it just kind of feels like this kind of glow is happening from what we see down here. And the top of more kind of exists in shadow. Yeah, it's an idea to play with. You never know, it could work. It could not. But I'll be keeping up all the progress of kind of everything, and then once pieces get released, what we can show. We've been doing a lot of work for Magic the Gathering in Hearthstone lately, which has been phenomenal. It has been taking up a lot of time. And can't wait to show everybody those pieces. So I'm kind of just going on top of the line drawing right now. This is kind of what I would do on the next stage. In fact, for me, I don't even mind squashing all my layers. I think it's totally fine. If you want to save out a different file, you can. But like me squashing it and just keep painting on top, I'm usually pretty comfortable with doing that. And so we're straight just painting on top of it now, and really just kind of taking everything, kind of pushing and pulling it all around. And just kind of cleaning shapes up. Like, do I have a little bit more of this orange light coming out from the eyes here? Are we gonna figure out some like actual pupil, and like, maybe I don't want so much just that straight orange. Maybe we get a little bit of yellow in there too. And so I can just kind of push this up. And it's like a gradual thing. And see, and then we can zoom in a bit. We're kind of far out. And then we're just slowly blending, and we're just using the DG main brush again. And we're just kind of making shapes that seem interesting. You know what's great is you can always kind of keep rendering and keep pulling it around, find out what works, what doesn't. If it doesn't work, you know, that's great about doing digital too, is we can kind of, it's so easy to just change colors around or just erase that over it. You don't have to worry about paint drying or anything like that. So I'm using a lot of these colors that are sitting underneath and kind of eyedropping them, and then we can kind of create different shapes. You know, like what are these kind of highlights doing? But so much of this kind of crazy sketch underneath is helping us inform and kind of guide us into weird ways that we might not have went before. You know, this is a process that can, I think, sometimes take me too long. You know, if I spent the time to do like really nice kind of line drawing and we just kind of did some flat colors underneath, that would certainly save me some time. And I think it's probably a direction I would like to kind of go in as far as my work is concerned. I think I use a lot of time on the cleanup, which you probably have seen from previous videos. But I also don't mind it too. It's kind of like a little zen place for me to go as we do this stuff. Yeah, and so we usually do these type of videos. We don't put any music on in the background, so feel free to put your own on if it's too quiet and you want a little bit more. Especially for these longer ones, it's sometimes get tough to not find like repetitive music to put in the background of what I can find. You guys just have to listen to me breathe instead. Yeah, so we're starting to kind of get this left side here figured out. We're kind of just eyedropping a lot of this. We're cleaning it up. We're still kind of keeping eyes on what this entirely larger shape is. And then maybe we'll get a little bit more kind of the red in here. And kind of what will be our highlights, and we'll kind of fade this down to render this little part out. You know, so like just a lot of eye dropping and kind of light blending. And we could be zoomed out more, working on more of like the larger picture. But I want to spend a little bit of time just kind of show how we kind of tackle some of the smaller stuff. And then, so these kind of larger areas, say like right here, you know, they can start to get pushed out and rendered. We can go back in and kind of grab some of these darker colors. We got a lot of construction workers out and around today, so the dog might be a little yippy. And we kind of go in and kind of break it up a little bit. You know, either with our some type of cracks or anything else that might be going on. She's crazy. We have a construction happening across the street, so she just stares out the window. And if they even get near our lawn, she goes nuts. All right, so let's zoom back out a little bit so we can kind of, we still want to keep an eye on a lot of this, kind of see what's happening. We'll bring some of this down here. So we're getting rid of all this line drawing, and I don't mind keeping it there. like some people might ask that, like, why don't you just kind of get rid of the line drawing? Sometimes I let the line peek through a little bit. Sometimes I don't. This always feels like a good process for me. I think the best thing we can always do is just figure out what process works for every one of us. That's why, like, any of these videos that you see online or on YouTube that claim to be the best way or the right way, it's all nonsense for the most part. You can find what's the best way for you. And so the best thing that you can do is look at a lot of videos, see how another artist treats it, and maybe that process will help your own work. But that's really the truth when it comes down to it, is just find out what you're comfortable with and has your process help you get the results that you're looking for. I just have seen so many artists have so many different types of process for how they work, and it's all totally different. They all get amazing results. If there was one right way to do it, we'd all just do it, and we would all be the best in the world. All right, so who knows really what's going on with this type of scanner, who knows, but you know, we're just playing around and we're just kind of trucking forward, see what works, what doesn't. You know, sometimes a line might work, sometimes it might not. That's fun to play with too. And then as we go, we'll keep adding more contrast and more color as we go forward, and that'll be pretty cool. I actually thought about giving kind of more like bluish tint to some of these teeth. And then I just kind of brush it on pretty light, because then we can kind of go harder later with some shadows and saturation and all that stuff. If you want to, you can try to find, you can try to make the teeth more realistic if you want, or shaped in a certain way. I think for this, it's okay just to, he's just got what look like teeth jammed into his face. Yeah, sometimes it'll work okay. I kind of want these kind of really contrasted kind of black lines and like this kind of, would almost be like ink work. I think we might be able to get some kind of neat results, and that's like a lot of how my work works for me, especially when it gets into coloring and lighting. There's so much of it, I just like to figure it out as I go. It's kind of a risky move, because sometimes it definitely doesn't work, and I think people on my stream on Twitch there's been moments where things just don't work, right? And that's fine. I used to be concerned about that, and like most artists, that streaming and showing our work can be a pretty scary thing. And I used to kind of prep up a lot of work beforehand, because I was kind of afraid that I would freeze, and I wouldn't know what to paint, and then I would be kind of even more afraid after that once I realized I was freezing up and the painting just wasn't coming together. But I think, I don't know what we were got us into talking about this, is that I think people like seeing those moments, because we only see, and I'm guilty of it too, as far as like Instagram posting goes. Like, I usually just put up final work that I'm happy with, and you see that from a lot of artists, that you just see what almost seems like perfection all the time, and then you kind of wonder yourself, and you look at your own work and you wonder why you're not producing perfection every time you put a pencil to a piece of paper. And that can be frustrating, because I know we're all very hard on ourselves as far as our own work goes. Yeah, so we're just going around and finding some interesting shapes here. We may not be able to get this whole thing done there, but we'll see how much we can get done. Maybe we can even get a section of it done, because then at least that can show kind of how we would carry it out to the rest of it. And even to pop that eye, when you kind of add this highlight, it always adds so much. You can really kind of add a whole bunch. You really can do so many different things with kind of eyeball highlights and all that type of stuff. Just try to always remember that it's kind of like this glassy sphere tucked into a socket in your head. And so where is that kind of highlight and reflection kind of coming from? It's always something to think about. All right, let's darken this up. Like I said, we're really just kind of, especially for this phase, it's a lot of just eye dropping and smoothing things out. You can see how much of this kind of DG main that I use. And we'll bring this thing kind of outward. Looks like it was kind of tucked underneath, but we'll bring the shape out front. what's great is once we have this much down, how much we're can just kind of color pick around the piece and see what works and what doesn't. We kind of lost any kind of semblance of a nose. I'm not too worried about it. Hello, computer. Yeah, we can just kind of keep adding to different parts of it here. I like to follow kind of shapes around the form too. And then even on that side, so like once I even start rendering, we'll kind of go into like an overlay if we want. And just like some subtle stuff. Like I still kind of want this kind of bluish light happening up here. And didn't go down. Into overlay, and we'll just kind of dab a little bit on top. Not too crazy, we can take the eraser. Kind of smooth out right here, so I want it to feel like there's that form of it kind of still curling underneath. And I think that's pretty important. And even like so, we'll get back to a normal layer. Sometimes even with the airbrush. And I'll go back in because you don't want so much of your piece to feel super smooth. And so I'll kind of just like brush on top. I don't want to go over everything, but it's kind of just pushing everything back a little bit. And then I can go back in with my DG main. And then kind of re-push everything and find out these little shapes. See, I'm kind of using the sketch in the background here to help figure out a lot for me. But we're starting to slowly bring color out. I think that's a pretty important part of kind of what we're usually shooting to do here. Same with these little areas here. It's okay if you go over a lot of it. It's all discovery. We're all finding new little areas to work into. And we're still just kind of breaking up a lot of these shapes. You're just flipping around the piece, that's all. This is always a great part to paint on. You just put like a movie on, put some music on, you're just kind of like in a rendering mode. And so I can kind of sit in this rendering mode for hours, you know. And sometimes parts take longer than others. Like maybe the skin here is actually far too light. We want to push it back more. You know, and it's really just all about decisions that you have to make when you're working on a piece. And what's working and what's not. Is it actually achieving the goals that you need the piece to do? Because there's so many times, especially when working on contract work, where I always have to remind myself, like, what is the purpose of this? And so that could be a bunch of things, especially for anything like Magic or Hearthstone. Like, does this read super small? Is the character clearly visible? Right? Are they forward facing the camera? Is the action or kind of idea that this piece has, is that coming across overall? And then readability always is a major part of it all. So let's kind of brush over this part. I think we can get the center part of the face done. That'd be great. And what you can do when you're working on a piece like this too is like, you can take a look and see like what parts of this painting are working really well for you when you're working on a piece, and like, why is that working well? And what can you do to bring that across to the rest of the piece? I think that's pretty important. I think we had this kind of like star deal happening here. And I wonder if we just brought the whole thing down into this little area. Maybe this whole thing is kind of a little bit darker to show a little more kind of contrast, where this kind of lighter scar might be. And then what kind of shapes can we create as it comes down here? That might be interesting. That's always an important part for me, is finding, so you have these overall interesting silhouettes and shapes, and then how do we break it with a bunch of shapes underneath that will also kind of add to it. And we're just kind of straight painting around top. You know, if this might have a little more kind of shadow on the right side. Sometimes if I drop too quick, my computer spazzes out on me. So that may happen time and time again. Once we have a lot of this though, we can really start pushing things even further. This is kind of like this like middle area of rendering. It's kind of like clean up, and we have some basic shapes and ideas coming forth. A lot of it was kind of just figured out on the fly, because we had done that kind of nice loose sketch, and we kept that sketch there to work on. These little interesting shapes are kind of sitting underneath here. And so we wouldn't want this kind of same value of this lighter color coming all the way down. It's still going to tuck in certain areas. So we can kind of go back, kind of figure it out where those areas might be. And so what I think we should do is figure out, we're going to push the darks a little bit further. And usually I almost always do it just with an overlay layer. I like to kind of cut across with some like pretty muted blues, and we can figure out quite a bit that way. You know, and then if this shadow is cutting across something, you know, I think sometimes I use this technique probably too much to kind of inform composition and light. This idea of like a beam of light kind of cutting across something. And I think that's something for us to always focus on too, is that like, am I using a certain technique too often? It's possible. So I know for some pieces going forward, I'm trying to figure out some kind of other techniques to get the same idea across. But I think for these kind of quicker pieces, it'll still kind of work, because really it's showing you is how much you can change a composition to fit the way you want just with the light. And I used to struggle with that a lot, is I was always trying to make the subjects of the piece inform my composition, and I always felt like stuck, and I couldn't figure out a composition that I liked because I needed characters to be a certain way. But you can do so much with just the light itself to help kind of change that up. And I think that's a good lesson. We'll go in and fade some areas out a little bit. Sometimes I like to go kind of blocky, and then I'll just take the eraser and kind of draw some areas out. I think that's a good kind of quick way, and then we can kind of show like highlights and shadow areas and how we treat that. I think it'll be pretty good. Okay, let's go back to a normal layer. And I think I want to bring in some of this. If this was kind of more of this like dead eye, maybe it's not going to have kind of any of that orangey color. And I'm just taking an airbrush to kind of smooth out that kind of spherical shape that's still existing here. Then we can go back and paint in the eyelids and everything like that. And how much you kind of want to mess with the eye itself. But see a lot of these colors and these like little kind of like slight reds that are existing underneath here. You know, I think it's a lot of these little small things you can kind of grab and color pick, and maybe that just adds a little bit to the piece that, you know, you never really planned on it, right? There's so much kind of things that just, there's like little Easter eggs all over the painting that you could grab and use to your advantage. Like, who knows with this maybe is more of that, go back to that kind of, something is actually on top of the head, and it's not actually skin up here.